Any views, discussions, or opinions expressed in this podcast do not represent in any way the opinions or positions of Stanford University, its staff, or its employees.
Welcome to the AI Frontiers podcast, a dialogue with tech pioneers hosted by Stanford University Technology Training. I'm Don Cameron. We are excited to welcome Josh Pinzel, who consults on AI-driven organizational change with extensive experience in sales enablement, process improvement, and organizational innovation. He developed a theater think methodology, blending his theater background to create impactful learning experiences for global companies such as Amazon, Skillsoft, and ELB Learning. And Josh, we appreciate the time to be here today for your busy schedule to join us.
Oh, no. Thank you for having me, Don. I appreciate you. Thanks a lot.
And we want to start off here, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into where you are today with working in the innovation in AI.
Who knows how we end up where we are, right? Prismatic career. So I'll try to go through the whole prismatic story because I think it sometimes is intriguing to folks. I started out grabbing a bunch of those IT certifications in the late 90s, A plus, Net plus, right? That'll come back to play in a second. But I went, got my degree in acting, wanted to be an actor, went to Northwestern, made some money doing the IT stuff on the side, eventually went to grad school at UNLV, was on faculty, adjuncting there, didn't finish the degree, went to Brooklyn College where I ended up getting my Master of Fine Arts. And I was a theater director and in the union. But while I'm there, it's New York City. So I had to start training. And I found an ad probably on Craigslist at that time that said, training for A plus, Net plus. And I said I could do that. And then I started training trainers. And because those were Department of Defense sort of requirements, right? And people needed them. And I had a 100% pass rate on getting people through. I somehow developed this side, right, career teaching people how to teach while I was doing theater, right, and getting my MFA. And that goes on, right? And essentially I approached the company that was publishing some of those books. They had a side company. I ended up working for that company, which did presentation skills, right, and sales skills, where I was able to take all this theater stuff and sort of meld it into a professional world, right? And I just decided theater wasn't going to do it at that point, right? My wife and I wanted to have a family, so ended up into hotels, got to Amazon, somehow launched Alexa globally, right, to all the offline sales channels, and then was at a company called Zoox for a bit doing autonomous vehicles, right? You're nodding your head that you might know because of, right, where they're located. Then Zillow Rentals, running sales enablement, and then moved over to Skillsoft, where I was for a bit. And finally, ELB Learning, where I am now. So the question is, why AI? And it just made sense to the way I had always been thinking, right? Which was essentially first principles bottom up, not top down. And so when the technology suddenly became available and accessible, it made innate sense to me, right? And enabled me to start working through things and thinking through things faster that, other people weren't thinking through. And as a result, it sort of became the thing people were looking at me for. By the way, I got an MBA at University of Illinois back there, so I have a business, degree too. And I can't tell you how or why, right? But somehow, I probably could. We could talk about it. We will. But somehow my unique perspective, right, of looking at human behavior, of looking at this thing which replicates human behavior or attempts to, right, which is trained on human knowledge, which Jensen Huang said, right, the IT department of the future is going to be the HR department of AI agents, right? That means this is relationship based. This is communication based. This is not a technology like us launching, right, and crimping wires and cables back in, those days and having to learn the OSI model. So I don't know how, but it all just worked out that way. And here I am, right? And over the last year and a half, I've basically been working with organizations and talking at conferences and keynoting because of what I think is a unique viewpoint, right, on how we should be approaching this transformative, I don't know, this paradigm shift, which is what it is, which is not like a technology or a tool, but like a teammate, right? Or a temp or a new hire or an intern or whatever metaphor you want to use, an actor, right? And I think it all starts from there. And then there are some key mechanisms and metaphors that come from there that sort of guide it. But there you go. There's the longish spiel that I think gets you to why and how, which I have no idea.
And following up on that, can you talk a little bit about, like, give an example of how you can view AI not just as a tool, but as a collaborative team member?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is we have to acknowledge that let's look at the difference between a human team member, because I think that gets us to the way of thinking about this differently, right? Just like, why do we train humans? We train them in order to mitigate risk, help them do something, and to shorten the learning curve, because they would figure it out without training, usually. Might not be perfect, right? But we do that because there is a scarcity of time and resources and money, right? But with AI, if you just think about it, you're talking, every time I open up a chat, I'm talking to this thing like a human, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is right now we focus on prompting, which I'm not saying is wrong, but hear me out. That is applying cognitive overwhelm to me in order to define the problem, because I'm going to put it into something that I hope will be as deterministic as possible and do exactly what I want it to do. Okay. And so we focus on how to prompt things correctly. And it becomes an iterative process of getting to the perfect prompt, which makes no sense because that's not the outcome. If instead you think about this as a temp or teammate, and let's just start with a temp without an NDA, right? You now can open up and start the process without having to identify what the problem is, which means now it can truly help you think through what the use case is, right? At some point, no matter if you put the perfect prompt in at the beginning or not, you're going to have to iterate to get to the perfect outcome. And when you get to that perfect outcome, if you think about this like a team member that you hired, you have an option. One is to say, I'll see you never again. Bye. Right? Or I guess you could open up the chat window again. There's going to be start problems with that. Or you can say, hey, this was great. This was exactly what I wanted, like a team member. Right? What were your lessons learned? How did we work together? What were the things we did correctly? What would you do differently? And now you can have it assess the way you worked, the outcomes you ended up going to, the things you couldn't explicate at the beginning, because you're not treating it like this tool, right? Which you have to put something in. And then you've gotten to that point, you can then say to it, hey, assuming we wanted to start this again, what prompt would I have given you, where blah, 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 a make it better or two. And now you have a very comprehensive prompt, right? And that prompt I think of as an onboarding document that I'm handing to my temp. And if you're creating agents or GPTs or whatever that is, essentially it's a pre-baked in, they have the onboarding document. And then you're adding knowledge, you're giving books. And, it's like, that's how I think about it, right? And so then you can think of Gemini or ChatGPT or OpenAI or whatever the models as like different schools. They're trained Stanford, they were trained Northwestern, they were at UT, they were at UW, whatever it is. And so they have slightly different ways of working, slightly different ways of talking to stuff. And you as an individual, right? You have to figure all that out. Like people say, right? Oh, working with Claude, it feels different than ChatGPT, right? And they have their favorites. It's like personalities. And I think then the key becomes thinking through that one more step, which is that means that now you as the individual have the ability to have a team around you. And I'll give you a tactical example in a second. But because this is built on language, which is so individual, right? And because that process between you and an agent, no matter where the prompt starts, is going to be personal, and you're going to have to customize it, the problem we're all trying to think of is how do I put prompts into stuff top down? And the fact of the matter is that's thinking of this like a tool, not like How do I allow you, Don, to hire any sort of people you want at scale, right? And how do I help you to do it quickly? And for instance, what that might look like is, let's say I'm writing a LinkedIn post. This isn't exactly how I do it, but I have an AI that'll write the LinkedIn post in an optimized manner. Or actually, I have my Josh P GPT, right? GPT trained on my stuff. I'll go to it and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Help me write something. You know me. So it'll reflect on all of my content. Now I take that and I go to the LinkedIn optimizer and I say, hey, optimize this for LinkedIn. Then I say, hey, content review team, can you take a look at this? Now, scarcity versus abundance mindset, I'm not going to spend the cognitive energy telling them what it is. So my content review team, right? And by the way, these are all agents that I put together. I'm happy to share, but they're just prompts, right? Looks at the content, makes up personas, makes actual individual personas from the type of people who would be reading the content, puts them in a focus group, right? Provides me their insights and feedback. So now I take that, I get feedback on the LinkedIn post, I make some adjustments. I go to my ghostwriter, which I've trained on my style of writing, right? I say, hey, throw this in, make it Joshify it. It Joshifies it. And now in 5 minutes, right, I'm at a point where I have something much closer. And as I need to refine it, rather than just copying and pasting it and fixing it, right, I just go back and forth between my agents, right? And in ChatGPT, you can do that easily by adding at this, at that. So it makes it even simpler. And some of that is, what you're looking at. But I think if we really play this metaphor out of, is it a teammate, it becomes extremely powerful. And it becomes a paradigm shift, just like digital photography, right? When we got digital photography, yeah, that changed the fact that, it's not in film and what kind of pictures and all the technology and like the quality of photos. But the real thing it changed, right, is our ability to capture memories, right? Instead of only capturing 24 photos and then having to change out my film, I can just take as many as I want on my phone and never even worry about it. And that is a change in mindset shift, in the sense that it changes the way I even think about using the tool, right? So I know I just droned on for a very long time, but and I think we could keep droning on about it, but I think that is the core fundamental shift people need to be making. And it's a powerful one once you start pulling on the thread.
I do want to talk a little bit more about those agents and GPTs that you've created. And I was wondering if you can give some examples of how you created those or how you came across to create that mini me one or the Josh P GPT.
Yeah. So it is all about thinking differently about using AI, right? In an abundance mindset, meaning you don't have to worry about identifying a problem before you send it to a team. So, and I'll take a step back to take a step forward. In process improvement, for instance, we have swim lanes. And the whole idea is you put tools in place to reduce swim lanes, to reduce changing between swim lanes, because the more changing, right, an email goes to this team, it takes a day, it comes back, right? And so as a result, we've learned to basically say, what's the most efficient way for me to communicate or put something or put it together? And we automatically start self-editing as a result, right? Because we're trying to put together an answer, the prompt. If instead you realize now you have swim lanes where there's no cost. There's no cost to doing a research, to go into the Stanford Storm and having it do research and having it do that 10 times. And as you're now doing that, the thing is not, the end goal is not the research itself, right? Because I'm not going to trust the intern's research. I'm not just going to give that to the judge. But now what it's be able to say is, man, if I could have 1 million interns write 1 million reports, that's a lot of data. So my thought starts to go there, right? And then I start to go, cool, well, how would I automate that? How would I speed that process up? Or I say, oh, I'm asking Gemini deep research or something, a question. It's not giving me the research I want. I need to go now to another AI and ask it to help me create a research brief, right? So you're doing that. And what I say is, you decide to use AI, you dialogue. as you're dialoguing, you make discoveries about what it is you want to dig into. Now, that's simply if you just open it, gives you an answer. I'm not reading the answer. I'm reading for things that are interesting so that I can say something the next thing. I'll sometimes even stop it, right? So you're doing this constant discovery, this constant metacognitive thing. And you're starting to say stuff like, why do you think that? Make that better. And when you do that, you're getting more ideas. Okay. And at some point you get the idea where you go, wow, I created this research document. Took me a while to get it to give me this research document the way I wanted it. I don't want to have to do that again. That's a discovery. And at that point then, right, I work with it to define, it's the next D, to define what it is that it's been doing. Total reverse, right, from definition at the top. And I do that by delegating to it to write it. Which, by the way, if you think about it like a teammate or like a new hire or a student that you're developing, right, you're not going to do the work for them. You guide them to do the work. You're going to have them look at your stuff. And I just want to point out, if you think about that from an academic point of view, it's actually kind of exciting because it means instead of saying, hey, turn in an essay, I could say, prove your work. Like turn in, use AI as much as you want, record your screen, and you have 1 hour and write the best paper you can, right? Now the question would be, oh, I would never be able to view that recording. Let's put legal stuff aside and whatever, right? Well, there's AI now that can look at video and summarize it for you. Or put it into a transcript with examples and call out specific places for you, right? And then my head goes, I wonder if I could build a tool like that. I go to the one that helps me build it. I build the thing. I say, great, what did you learn? Let me put that back in. And so it is a constant process of discovering and half an iteration, right? And half finished things, which is fine because the cost is so small.
And which tools do you find yourself building the GPTs in? Do you find yourself going from tool to tool? Like you mentioned earlier about this tool, like say Claude, can help you more with this aspect of research, whereas GPT this aspect of it.
So ChatGPT is probably the go-to because of the ability to do the GPTs, the custom GPTs, and the way you can do them and how easy it is to sort of deploy those. I don't use I build them myself, though. I don't use their thing that helps you build it because, again, it is this is built on language and language is individual. So I'll generally do that to make those. Once you have a prompt, now you can bring it anywhere, right? Claude, I love there's a visualization feature there, right? So you can create visuals. You can't create necessarily agents that you can share with anyone. ChatGPT, I can share all these links with anyone. Anyone can get it, right? Claude, I can't share the link to my agent, but I can put a prompt in there. And I can, for instance, have one that visualizes scientific articles for me in a visual narrative way, right? Or create a game that I could then put into e-learning, right? And so it lets me do that quickly. And the reason I prefer that, it's not that ChatGPT can't do that and it won't write the code. It's that Claude shows me the visual immediately so I can reflect. Because to me, it's all a metacognitive process, right? Google LLM, Notebook LLM, that's great for reflecting on information. Put all your stuff in there and ask it, to ask it about something you were thinking. I mean, I have all my college documents. I have 15,000 pieces of paper scanned in some place. I'm processing them through AI, and I can't wait to look at and say, like, look at the last 10 years of my writing. How has it improved? What's changed? What are right? So, but that would have to be a custom build, right? And how do I do that? You find another tool. I like building right now. If you're going to build programs, which I have an MFA in theater, I do not. I know very little coding, right? I got by, but I do not code. And I built amazing stuff there's a bunch of things out there. Cursor is the most advanced. If you're a beginner, I would go to Replit, Gemini, I think, has the great advanced search, and I'll use the back end of Gemini because it has a 2 million token window, on the back end. So if I need to put a lot of data in and look at something, that's what I'll try using for that. I'll use Storm Stanford, right? And the deep research features, and now the new one that just came out. I've been experimenting with Operator, right? And by the way, you'll notice all of these are like at the foundational level things, right? DeepSeek, I think, is fascinating for having it do the deep mind and then seeing how it's thinking, right? So I work with all those. If I need to build a specific tool, I'm not going to the third-party ones right now, right? Essentially, what I'm using is the APIs, and I'll go to a Replit and build my own tool.
Yeah, now I want to take a little bit of a step back.
Yeah.
And talk about when organizations are shifting towards utilizing AI for L&D. What kind of pushback have you gotten from these organizations or people you've talked to when it comes to presenting AI as a tool for this type of training?
Well, okay. So this is a multifaceted question, right? So let's go with the personal, let's go with the individual, and then the organizational too, because I think there's the aspect of, is it going to take my job? Right? Which is an individual. And then there's, what does this mean for my organization? And I think those are two slightly different things. But let me talk to both of them. From the individual point of view, people are either using it or they're not, right? Which then means, by the way, you're already opening your organization up to diversity and bias issues. Not that that's a problem, right? If that's what you want. But, if only certain people are using it, that's going to cause a problem down the line, right? People are worried that it might take their jobs, especially because I show them all the cool stuff they can do. But the problem is, it's not doing the work for you, it's doing the work with you. Right? So in learning and development is a great example. We used to spend a lot of our time just creating the scripts and the personas and all the stuff, right? Because the time was so valuable that we had to do all the analysis, the stuff up front. Now you're saying to them, instead of doing that, think about, I want to create 5 custom programs for this learning experience, and I'm going to bring them all these ideas in tomorrow to our meeting. And you can do that in 30 minutes, right? Now it's not about, I'm shifting it from, you had to spend your time doing the work, and maybe you liked that, which is fine. You're going to need to do the last 90, the last 10%, right? But also, for instance, putting an AI bot into L&D, into an e-learning, is very easy now. So one thing for people to think about is, yeah, there's going to be disruption, but it also means now we're moving from content as content as a commodity to true individualized learning, because every single one of your learners now has this. I have an adaptive tutor. Ask it to teach you something. It'll ask you a question on that topic, right? To suss where you are, and then it'll give you the next one. So from an individual point of view, as a learning and development professional, it could take your job if all your job is pointing and clicking. And that might have been all you've been able to do because you had limited budget, or you had to do the PowerPoint that you didn't want to do. Now the benefit is, throw all that away, and I want you to start with, what would be the best way to solve this business problem? And I guarantee you, with AI now, you can solve that problem the way you would want to, or closer to the way you'd want to, rather than starting at, what's the common denominator tool I have to use. So once they start to see some of this, they understand that, and that gets over that. And also, L&D professionals, you're human behavior researchers. You're human behavior experts. This thing is made to act like a human, right? We're talking about coaching it. So y'all are the most empowered to do it. So there's that. From the large sense of the organizations, right? L&D has done not a great job for years of proving out any sort of ROI, right? Which is difficult, I understand. Part of that is how we structure stuff. Part of that has been systems, right? And as a result, now a lot of folks are worried, There's not a lot of investments, weird stuff's happening. People are pausing because of AI. There's all these tools coming out, right? And so it's going to bypass all these folks. And I think you can see it that way, and that is there, obviously. But what this opportunity then is for us to redefine what HR and what L&D is, and to the org, right? And now you can look at the data you have, as poor as it is, and maybe start to get some ideas for causal relationships, right? Maybe you can help your organization go through the change management process they're dealing with. Because I guarantee everyone's going to start rolling out training. And that's where the learning and development folks can say, hold on a second, let's pause. What if we don't spend the money all of a sudden and we take some time and think about what is our group? What are you leaders? Like, are you set? Are you thinking the mindset the right way? Because you're just going to put AI into an e-learning? Like, that doesn't make sense. How would it ask AI how to teach AI? Gone down that path, trust me. So another example, by the way, AI is a student. So what if your job is the learner's job is not to pass a quiz, it's to get an AI student to pass a quiz. Me as the facilitator now, I can see, or the professor, I can see the conversation they had with the AI student and how long it took them and what things they bugged on and where they had to go back and forth. And now it's turning into a metacognitive exercise. So as a result of that, all learning and development educators will need to change the way, right, we approach stuff, but it can be freeing. And we need to be the folks going into our organizations now and getting ahead of this, because we will be the ones that are blamed when it's not productive. Because I guarantee teaching prompting and all that is not productive. And so that allows us to be the saviors. Seriously.
Can you talk a little bit more about the role that metacognition plays in the future of learning with AI? And what your thoughts are?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about this is the metacognition revolution, to quote an Atlantic article, right, that Google co-wrote. It's cognition to me, right, is put in. This is the same thing that happened, by the way, with like calculators, show your work, right? So now it's like metacognition is the show your work. And it's the show your work not just to the professor, but to the self. And the ability to have work reflected to you so quickly, that's a metacognitive development, right? So instead of having to learn how to code, which is very cognitive, I can focus on working with an AI coding team and see what I need to give it so it accomplishes better, right? In our relationship. And that requires a metacognitive approach, because it also means I'm having to understand, why is it doing stuff? A great example, I mean, turn it on the head of AI. It'll help you understand AI better too. There was that thing going around, what's the most efficient way to measure the fastest of 6 horses? And it should be a race, let's say, right? But the AI was saying, divide it into 3 groups and do all this, right? And everyone was saying, oh, how stupid AI is. Well, it's because you're treating it with cognition. You gave you an answer. Metacognition is going and saying, which I did. And I wrote an article about it. It's on LinkedIn, or actually I had the AI write the article, right? Why did you say that? And it started saying, right, I made assumptions based on the way you worded this because it sounded like a classic problem. Fastest could mean you wanted to account for other variables. So I didn't know if you want to, So suddenly its assumptions and stupidity begin to make sense. And that interplay to me is now helping me think differently about asking the question, about working with the thing. And that's the metacognition, right? It's not the fact that Notebook LM creates a podcast. It's the fact that you can listen to 10 podcasts of your stuff, right? And have it made in 10 minutes for free.
That's
and
right.
Then listen to it.
Like the O1 instead of GPT, or the DeepThink of the advanced reasoning, really helps you be able to build upon how they get to the response that they sent you.
Which, by the way, is why prompting is dying, or isn't going to be needed, right? Because all the thinking we had to do for the AI up front that we were putting on us, the models are now able to do somehow. We're still figuring out how to prompt necessarily, right? But yeah.
And I just have a few more questions here, as we are coming up in about half an hour.
Yeah.
But what piece of advice would you give an L&D professional who is trying to lead the charge in integrating AI within their workplace learning?
So I'll go through just sort of like how I think about this from a change management perspective. I think that'll help because the first step is immersion, right? People are using this. So whether or not your organization is either saying we're going to approve something, right? They've either say here is our policy, or you're one of the lucky ones where they put out a policy where they've given you access to something. Now sometimes they've given you access and haven't given you a policy, right? Although we all have data policies, so all organizations can go back to that, right? But the first thing is this is not a top-down thing. I cannot put AI into this. I cannot teach AI to people. I'm not going to tell it how people need to use AI. What you need to do is the first thing is immerse them. And what that means to me is adoption, getting them in the tool. And the way to get them in the tool is to motivate them. And generally that's by labs, showing them cool stuff, having the 5 people in your organization who like get it, show you what they're doing, bring in webinars, right? That's a lot of what I do. I sometimes just call it's like an hour and a half of mind blowing. And I apologize to people, but that just gets them to decide to go in. And that, if that is all we can do, great, as long as we put a boundary around it. And during that time, that is when you work with the leadership to make sure, right, they comprehend this thing. And they think about the fact that if they're buying an AI or they're buying a product with AI in it, it's probably going to go out of date very quickly. If they enable everyone to use AI, they have as many developers as they want. How are you going to get the benefit of all that?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to attract new people? So you can hit now on FOMO as a learning and development professional, which is a sales technique. It's really what it is, right? But essentially everyone's always, where's the ROI? Well, now you can make sure you're going to measure ROI from now on. But this gives you the opportunity to say, listen, it's out here. I mean, the question would be, how should people adjust to the internet today in L&D? Now, 25 years ago, we had time to adapt to that, right? E-learning, because you had T1 lines, right? And then it developed, but this was all day one. So everyone's catching up, and your bosses, the risk teams, the insurance teams, they are worried. And so actually doing this in your own team, you can then say, here was where our team struggled. Here is where we struggled. Here is where we think the organization is going to have problems. We did a webinar with our 30 people. We looked at the recording to see where the issues are. Here, IT team. And you've done that without a lot of money, right? You've basically just creating an environment. That's the first thing. So just immersion. Then there's the iteration phase. And that's where you're also into this instruction. Like that's where you're spending more of your money, and you do that afterwards or your time or your resources, because now you figured out what the heck you're doing. And once you do that and you get people using it, then you can get to institutionalizing it. Then you can get to, right, innovation. And so the problem is we're treating this like a top-down, we have to figure it out, ADDIE model, PMP, whatever it is. That's not this. So you have to start. And the best way to do that is to create space, figure out what the boundaries are, right? And show them some mind-blowing stuff. And if you need to find someone to do it, find it.
And I've got one last question here for you.
Yep.
It's kind of like a two-pronged question, but first off, how do you see AI transforming this personalized learning within the next 5 to 10 years? And what would you want to see?
I will see the both being the same, which is instead of even this idea of personalized learning sort of makes it, I think the table stakes of the future in learning are the learner being able to decide how they want to learn. So essentially it's not take an assessment in year one in one of 4 dynamically created learning paths. It's you're working with an AI to create the learning experience that works best for you. And the reason it'll work is because the AI at scale can motivate, reply, respond, do all the things you need. And so I think it'll move away from content-driven paths, right, to literally individual dynamic paths. I think we'll be there far sooner than 5 years. I think it's possible now. I think people are toying with it. But I think I would say in a year or two, people could be doing that. And if you're starting up and you don't have an LMS and you don't need to do all that, that's what I would do is I'd be building my own thing and deploying my L&D team to build our own stuff. And once you get it to a point you can't anymore, great. Spend some money, go develop it. But now you own it. It's yours. You're not paying a license. You're not doing all this stuff. You don't have a bunch of bells and whistles you don't want. So I don't know if that answered the question necessarily, Don, but that's where I see it is I decide how I want to learn. You provide me the boundaries, right? But as a result, and you make sure I'm motivated and incentivized, but I can decide what my table stakes are.
And I really appreciate that. And thank you again
Oh yeah, thank you.
sharing all of your thoughts and insights. And we also want to thank you for your offer to supply some more resources that we can put up on our website later on for folks.
Yep.
And was there any other final notes before we finish off for today?
You know, I think my MFA and my neurodiversity are the reasons why this just sort of quote unquote makes sense. So I encourage two things. One is if you create and if you start to create organizations and structures in whatever way that is that focus on the needs of neurodiverse individuals, you essentially create universal. You solve universal problems across race, gender, identity, etc. And those people who are not currently able to be hired can be 120 to 140% more productive. So it solves a hiring crunch. So that's the first part. The second part is engage with the arts. Like humanities, we need them more. It will not be a failure of can AI build it? It will be a failure of can I imagine big enough for what AI can build? And that means we need the arts, not only for that, but to create and become our moral censor, right? Our moral guide. The last thing I'll just say is this, someone left me with, if we are going to create something in our image, we should be prepared for the same consequences, right, as occurred in Genesis and beyond.
Well, thank you so much again. And this brings us to the end of this episode of the AI Frontiers Dialogue with Tech Pioneers. And we hope you enjoyed our conversation with Josh Pinzel. And thank you for listening. And until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the frontiers of AI. And Josh, thank you again very much.
Thank you very much.